Dzień dobry. Dziękujemy za przybycie na kolejny webinar organizowany przez EXATEL. Widzę, że uczestnicy jeszcze dołączają, więc poczekajmy minutkę. Za minutkę oficjalnie rozpoczniemy i przedstawię naszych dzisiejszych prelegentów. Dobrze, myślę, że możemy już rozpoczynać, szanując czas osób, które są punktualne. Kto się spóźni, to najwyżej dołączy w trakcie. Witam Państwa serdecznie podczas kolejnego webinaru EXATEL. Jak to zwykle bywa, nasze webinary są związane głównie z cyberbezpieczeństwem. I dzisiaj opowiemy o tym, jak chronić Active Directory przed atakami. Ja nazywam się Iwona Kucharewicz i chciałam przedstawić naszych dzisiejszych prelegentów. Będą nimi Paulina Blicharska-Powązka, która jest kierownikiem projektów w EXATEL, oraz Calum Channel Senior Solution Architect z firmy Semperis. Tu jeszcze chciałam dodać, że EXATEL jest oficjalnym dystrybutorem rozwiązań Semperis w Polsce, stąd nasz dzisiejszy temat spotkania. Mam nadzieję, że wyniosą Państwo z niego interesujące informacje dla siebie. Paulina, przekazuję Ci głos.
Dziękuję, więc witam jeszcze raz wszystkich. Tak jak Iwona wspomniała, nazywam się Paulina Blicharska. Jestem kierownikiem projektu w EXATEL. Cyber security zajmuję się od 12 lat. Calum natomiast z firmy Semperis cyber security jest od 20 lat. Od 5 lat mocno zajmuję się Active Directory. Z racji tego, że Calum nie mówi po polsku, jego część prezentacji odbędzie się w języku angielskim. Ok, więc zaczynajmy. Oj, zaskakujemy. Jest. Pandemia COVID sprawiła, że praca zdalna rozpowszechniła się bardziej niż kiedykolwiek wcześniej. Wpłynęło to na funkcjonowanie pracowników i postawiło przed firmami zupełnie nowe wyzwania w kwestii zarządzania. Zmiana ta wzmocniła potrzebę wdrażania nowych, innowacyjnych rozwiązań z zakresu cyberbezpieczeństwa. By pracownicy zdalni mogli bezpiecznie i efektywnie wykonywać swoje obowiązki, niezbędna jest technologia, która zapewni im bezpieczny dostęp do potrzebnych zasobów. Active Directory jest najpopularniejszym narzędziem do uwierzytelniania. W związku z tym jest również najbardziej narażone na niebezpieczeństwa. Firmy powinny mieć możliwość szybkiego odtworzenia Active Directory, jeżeli już do tego ataku dojdzie. 80% wszystkich ataków opiera się na kradzieży tożsamości. Tak jak wspomniałam, Active Directory jest podstawowym źródłem uwierzytelniania dla większości organizacji, a na tym slajdzie widzimy tylko kilka spektakularnych ataków z ostatnich lat. Maersk padł ofiarą cyberprzestępców w 2017 roku. Ekrany migały na czarno, a pracownicy biegali przerażeni, krzycząc do innych kolegów z pracy, by czym prędzej odłączali sprzęt od sieci, gdyż każda minuta zwłoki może równać się z nieodwracalnymi zmianami. Odłączenie całej sieci zajęło 2 godziny. Technicy mieli problemy z lokalizacją kontrola domeny, a przywracanie porządku w firmie zajęło aż 2 tygodnie. Więc w przeciągu tego czasu udało się odbudować sieć składającą się z 4000 serwerów oraz 45 000 komputerów, co naraziło firmę na ogromne straty finansowe. Calum pokaże nam, jak szybko i łatwo postawić AD. Calum, can you show us how easy it is to recover AD after attack?
Most definitely, and I'll start sharing my screen, and a very good morning to all the attendees, and I'm sorry that I'm speaking English, but I think that's the benefit for everybody. My Polish actually sucks. So just let me share the screen. And today, this morning, before the webinar started, I started to browse the internet, downloaded some files on my domain controller, and oh my God, what am I hit with? But it doesn't matter, right? Because I've got multiple domain controllers. So, okay, one domain controller's been hit with WannaCry. Doesn't matter. We go to the second. Oh, that's been hit with WannaCry as well. It doesn't matter. I've got a third domain controller. Well, you guys know the story, right? Domain controllers are all connecting to each other, replicating changes to each other, meaning that if one domain controller gets hit with ransomware or malware, this is going to spread through all of your domain controllers. So what are we going to do? We need the domain controllers up and running. At this stage, in my case, it's only a background picture, but for many other companies who have been breached with malware, this wasn't just a background picture. They have been really hit with malware. So what are our choices to clean this up? In my opinion, we have two choices of cleaning this up. We can invest time and money into software that's going to have a look at all the files on the domain controller, getting rid of any files that might have been breached, and just keeping the files that are legit for Microsoft, for example. This is going to be a very lengthy program, process, and we're not even guaranteed that we're going to have success at the end. What happens if some Microsoft DLL files have been changed via the malware, and just deleting or quarantining Microsoft Windows DLL files could lead to a blue screen. So the only other choice that we actually have would be to execute a forest recovery, replacing all of these breach servers and restoring Active Directory functionality to fresh servers. And this is exactly what I'm going to walk you through this morning. So I don't need, for the webinar, we do not need these domain controllers up and running now. In a real world scenario, maybe you would leave these breached domain controllers up and running, and then you could also just do an restore Active Directory functionality to an isolated network. So let's just turn off these domain controllers for now. Don't forget, we've got 4 domain controllers that we want to turn off. So that's the first one down, the second one, the third one, and finally the fourth one. Just to show you there's no tricking going on here. These are my 4 domain controllers. We can see we're still waiting for domain controller 01 to turn itself off. And now all of my production domain controllers, they have now been turned off. Okay, let's have a look at the Semperis Active Directory Forest Recovery tool. So we're looking at the logon screen. And as you can see, we have actually got 2 consoles for our solution. In the administration console, hey, we're a backup tool, right? So we can define a backup plan. What domain controllers do we want to back up? When do we want them backed up? And where do we want the backup files to land? Also, please note that we have different ways of logging on using a domain username, integrated Windows authentication, i.e. the user that I'm logged on as can be automatically logged onto the solution, but also we can connect up to SAML services. So I've connected my ADFR console up to Azure Active Directory, which would also give me more protection, i.e. offering multi-factor authentication. For the purpose of this demo, I would like to concentrate on the recovery console. So now I'm going to log on to the recovery console. And what we are going to see is a very minimal console. We don't want to make a recovery console, which has got lots of features here. After all, many times when our customers need to go into the recovery console, they're under a lot of stress. Maybe their Active Directory has been burnt down to the ground. The whole company is at a standstill at the moment. Nobody can work until we get Active Directory back up and running again. So the only feature that we offer within the ADFR is the recovery of parts of your Active Directory or the whole Active Directory. For this demo, we are going to use a full forest recovery. When we pick the forest recovery, we also need to tell the solution with what backup data do we want to work with. This is a drop-down box, and as you can see, this morning at 8 o'clock, a backup was automatically taken of my domain controllers. Which domain controllers have been backed up? Well, we get the answer as soon as we pick the backup data. So here on the left-hand side, you can see that 4 domain controllers have been backed up with our solution. And also you can see that the ADFR server is trying to reach these servers. It's not going to be possible, though. We actually started off this demonstration by turning off the domain controllers, which is what we can see here, disconnected. The ADFR server cannot reach these machines running on this IP address. So where are we going to restore Active Directory to? Well, I have already installed 4 vanilla fresh Windows servers, and these are what we are going to use today. And they're not running in the background. We're going to jump into my Hyper-V session, and we're going to start these 4 machines down here. These are pretty much vanilla machines. There's not really too many changes being made on these machines, but I want you guys to absolutely believe everything I'm telling you. So let's have a quick look at one of these machines to see what changes I have made and what's been left pretty much as standard. Logging on. The only account on this machine is the default Windows administrator account. Also, we can see there's no domain information. These servers have not been added to a domain. And anyway, we turn the domain controllers off. Which domain do they actually want to log on to? So when I log on as the administrator, let's have a look at some of the things that I have changed or haven't changed. Firstly, let's have a look, for example, at the host name of this machine. As many of you will know that when you install a Windows machine, that the machine gets a temp name that you can change. The name of this machine is Win-OLJK, whatever. I have not even changed the name of this machine. During the recovery process, this machine name will change. I'm logged on to this machine on the left-hand side, and this machine is going to get the backup file of my DC01, meaning this will change during the process. What software has been installed on this machine? Let's have a look in the control panel. Uninstall a program. And Google Chrome has been installed, but it's not installed on this machine. I actually use a golden image, and it's the Google Chrome is in the image. The only software that I have installed on this machine is the Semperis ADFR agent. We do need the ADFR agent running on your domain controllers so that we can create a backup. And also we need the agent installed on any machines that you might be using as the target for the restoration. Otherwise, the only other change I have made to this machine, it's not a requirement. So my original domain controllers, they're using IP address at the end 1, 2, 3, 4, very simple, so that I can even remember the IPs in a demo. What we can see down here, though, is that for these machines, these fresh machines, I'm actually using different IP addresses, which we can see here. So the machines I'm using for the restore, they're using at the end 11, 12, 13, and 14. Otherwise, everything is very much vanilla. There's no extra software being installed. In fact, even when we go into the Windows administrative tools, we're not going to find anything about active users and computers or DHCP or DNS. There has been no changes made on these machines at all. So let's go back into the Active Directory forest recovery solution. We need to tell the solution which IP addresses do we want to use for the target IP. I have only got 4 domain controllers, so this could be quite an easy job, right? Just copy and paste, type up one of the first IPs, copy and paste it onto the next one. But then imagine very complex companies. Some of our customers, they have over 500 domain controllers. copy and pasting and changing 500 IP addresses, well, that could be a very lengthy task and it could be prone to errors. So I'm going to use a feature of ADFR. I am going to import the target IPs. This is a very simple file. ADFR can help you with the generation of this file. In fact, let me just edit this file. I'll just show you how simple it is. So here we just have the name of the domain controller. We can see the domain this domain controller is joined to, and we can see the normal IP address of this domain controller. The only thing I have added into this file is that I've added in the 192.168.14.11, meaning that this domain controller will be restored to this IP address, and the same for the others. Domain controller 2, child DC02, child DC1, and it's going to be restored to this IP address. So let's import this file. Takes a couple of seconds to import the file, and we get a message saying that they've been imported successfully. So the only difference or the only change that has happened now is that the target IPs have been automatically added. And as soon as the target IP was added, the ADFR server tried to connect to the Windows server behind this IP address and check that it's got an agent installed, and we get the connected. Let's continue with the restore. On the next screen, we get some more high-level information that this domain controller, which is part of this AD site, and it's going to be restored to this IP address. All 4 domain controllers are going to be restoring via the backup file, which is a very fast and easy way to restore your Active Directory. That's all the information that the ADFR solution actually needs. So let's go ahead and start the recovery. So on the left-hand side, we can actually see the progress panel. We can have a look at the task that the ADFR server has already done. We can see the task that the ADFR server is currently working on. And also we can see some of the tasks that still need to be executed. I quite like this view. It gives a very solid view of exactly what's happening. But for anybody who wants some more information, we could even go into a split view where you still see the task on the left-hand side. But on the right-hand side, we can now see exactly the log file, exactly what's happened. So what has happened up till now? Let me scroll down a little bit in the log file. So at the very, very start, the ADFR server reached out to these 4 machines that we're using for the restore, and then it's starting to have a look at to see if the agent needs updating. It might be that a company has set up some vanilla machines like I'm showing you in the demo, but these machines were installed a year ago, 2 years ago. They're only going to be used in the case of an Active Directory disaster. So the ADFR server is just going to make sure that the agent is up to date. After it has updated the agent, then the server has started to look at, is the backup file that's being used, is this present on the domain controller? In the case of these 4 machines I'm using, the backups were not even on the domain controller, so the ADFR server copied the backup files to the 4 domain controllers. And then finally, that's the process that is actually running now. These 4 domain controllers have been rebooted into the directory services recovery mode. When the servers enter the directory service recovery mode, they're going to be unpacking the encrypted backup file. They're going to start putting all of the files in place, installing any services that are needed until we finally reach the end. If nobody's been counting, how many mouse clicks did I actually need to start the recovery? Well, it was only 6 mouse clicks. So I'll hand back to Paulina for a wrap up of what I have actually just shown you.
Thank you, Calum, for this invaluable knowledge. Let's go back to my screen. Calum właśnie pokazał nam, jak łatwo można odzyskać Active Directory po ataku. A to dlatego, że Semperis odseparował niezbędne komponenty do odzyskania Active Directory, pomijając te, które dużo ważą i te, które mogą zawierać złośliwe oprogramowanie. Stąd kopia zapasowa ma mniejsze wymagania, a system operacyjny prawdopodobnie będzie zainfekowany złośliwym oprogramowaniem. I znalezienie tego pliku, oczyszczenie go i odseparowanie jest bardzo czasochłonne. Tu widzimy instrukcję Microsoftu. Żeby postawić na nowo Active Directory, trzeba przejść przez te wszystkie punkty krok po kroku. Jest aż ich 33. Jeżeli chcielibyśmy wydrukować sobie to dostalibyśmy około 97 stron manuala. Co więc należy zrobić, żeby zabezpieczyć nasze środowisko, zmitygować ryzyko oraz czas odzyskania narzędzia naszego uwierzytelniania? NIST spieszy nam z pomocą i określa szereg zalecanych standardów, których organizacje z sektora publicznego, jak i prywatnego mogą przestrzegać, aby wzmocnić profil cyberbezpieczeństwa. Ramy NIST obejmują 5 kluczowych funkcji i są to identyfikacja, ochrona, wykrywanie, reagowanie i odzyskiwanie. Semperis opiera się na zaleceniach NIST i oferuje nam ochronę podczas całego cyklu. Jesteśmy teraz w fazie przed atakiem. Tu Semperis oferuje nam DSP, czyli Directory Service Protection, oraz Purple Knight, który jest bezpłatnym narzędziem do pobrania ze strony Semperis. DSP znajduje i naprawia luki w zabezpieczeniach Active Directory za pomocą wskaźników bezpieczeństwa zarówno w środowisku lokalnym, hybrydowym oraz w chmurze. Przechodząc do etapu podczas ataku, DSP także chroni nas w tej fazie. Atakujący zazwyczaj działają poza godzinami pracy, więc Semperis przygotował się na to i wprowadził automatyczne naprawy. To znaczy, jeśli wykryte zostanie zagrożenie, narzędzie może automatycznie podjąć działania naprawcze w celu zminimalizowania ryzyka. I wreszcie w etapie po ataku, dzięki Semperis czas odzyskania tych danych jest mierzony w godzinach, a nie w dniach lub tygodniach. Calum pokazał nam, jak szybko można odtworzyć Active Directory. Jesteśmy w stanie to zautomatyzować za pomocą zaledwie kilku kliknięć, unikając błędów ludzkich i znacznie skracając czas przestoju o średnio 90%. A to wszystko działa dzięki pracownikom Semperisa, którzy łącznie mają ponad 150 lat doświadczenia. Są to głównie byli pracownicy Microsoftu, którzy znają Active Directory od podszewki. Co jeszcze robią ci ludzie dla swoich klientów? Wspierają nas poprzez cały proces ataku dzięki ciągłemu monitorowaniu oraz szybkim odtwarzaniu Active Directory. Semperis oferuje nam również wsparcie 24 godziny na dobę, 7 dni w tygodniu. Jak już Państwo widzieli, Calum pokazał nam, jak szybko odzyskać Active Directory. Możemy być pewni, że jest to bezpieczny i szybki backup. Automatyzacja jest tu bardzo pomocna, jak i możliwość odtworzenia lasu z dowolnego miejsca. Wspomniane wcześniej Purple Knight jest to bezpłatne narzędzie od Semperis. Jest to narzędzie do oceny bezpieczeństwa Active Directory. Enter ID pozwala odkryć wskaźniki narażenia i wskaźniki kompromitacji w naszym środowisku hybrydowym, chmurowym lub lokalnym. Co nam daje Purple Knight? Odkrywa zagrożenia. Narzędzie przeprowadza kompleksowe testy w poszukiwaniu ryzykownych konfiguracji, podatności związanych z Active Directory. Pomaga nam również zidentyfikować luki w zabezpieczeniach ID i wskazuje ewentualne naprawy. Po tym całym teście dostajemy raport z wynikami oceny, gdzie widzimy w 5 kategoriach, jak chronione jest nasze Active Directory oraz dostajemy wskazówki od ekspertów do spraw cyberbezpieczeństwa. DSP oferuje nam nie tylko ochronę Active Directory, ale też Entra ID, dawne Azure. Otrzymujemy ciągłą ocenę podatności w czasie rzeczywistym, alerty oraz automatyczną naprawę, raporty zgodności oraz monitorowanie odporne na manipulacje. Chciałabym jeszcze chwilę poświęcić na podsumowanie naprawdę ważnych kwestii związanych z bezpieczeństwem w hybrydowym środowisku Active Directory. Jak wiadomo, zarówno lokalna usługa ID, jak i Entra ID, wcześniej znane jako Azure, mają własne unikalne wyzwania związane z bezpieczeństwem. Dodając dodatkową złożoność w hybrydowych środowiskach Active Directory, które są najbardziej powszechne, powierzchnia ataku dramatycznie rozszerza się. Ataki mogą rozpocząć się lokalnie i przenieść się do chmury, tak jak było w przypadku SolarWinds, lub na odwrót. Musimy się już tutaj martwić nie tylko o ruch boczny, ale także o ruch pionowy. Uzyskanie wglądu w te ścieżki ataku i relacje między tożsamością lokalną a tożsamością w chmurze jest absolutnie krytyczne. Semperis jest to potężne narzędzie, które może zapobiegać, wykrywać i reagować na ataki tożsamości, zarówno w środowisku lokalnym, jak i w chmurze. Jednak prawdziwym przełomem jest możliwość rzeczywistego wglądu w te oba środowiska i tworzenia krytycznych połączeń z zagrożeniami. W przeciwnym razie mogłyby zostać pominięte z powodu ogromnych ilości danych, narzędzi, a nawet zespołów. Semperis zapewnia pojedynczy widok ekspozycji lub naruszeń w całym hybrydowym środowisku oraz możliwość podjęcia natychmiastowych działań poprzez automatyzację lub ręczną interwencję w jednej konsoli. Calum, could you show us a little bit of DSP and Purple Knight?
Most definitely. Let me share my screen again. And here we can see I'm logged onto a Windows server. I'm logged onto a machine, and I've already downloaded the Purple Knight tool. We have posted the link to this tool. It's an absolute free tool. You just need to give in your email address and you download a zip file. Before you unzip it, just go into the properties, make sure the files are not blocked, and then just unzip all of the files. There is no installation to this tool. It is a very easy tool for organizations to quickly scan the Active Directory for any vulnerabilities that could be misused by users or attackers. So once you've started the tool, accept the license agreement, click Next. And here we can see exactly what Paulina just mentioned. We can scan our Active Directory, we can scan your Azure Active Directory, or even scan a Noctua environment if you have one. Just for this demo, I'll pick my Active Directory and my forest. Click Next. And now we can see all of the categories of the indicators of exposure that are going to be running against your Active Directory. We can open up these categories, and now you can actually see all of the indicators of exposure that we are going to be running against your Active Directory, and you can gain some more information on the security framework, tagging, the description of the check, and also the likelihood of a compromise. Once you've gone through the indicators of exposure and you're happy about the scripts that are going to be executed, just start the test by clicking the Run Test at the bottom right. While the tests are running, this is only going to take a couple of seconds. Let me just give you some background information. We want to be totally transparent to our partners and to our customers to exactly what is happening to your Active Directory. So we have added the scripts that are being run by Purple Knight into the directory that you download from the Purple Knight. You can go into the script directory. Here you can see all of the indicators of exposure they've put into their own directory. You can go into the directory, you see the versioning number, and then finally you can also get to the actual PowerShell scripts that are going to be run against your Active Directory. You can also open up the PowerShell scripts. You can have a look at more detailed information, exactly what's happening, but just be aware, if you were to change this script in any way, all of our scripts have been signed with a digital signature block, and Purple Knight would refuse to execute the change script. Why do we do this? Well, Purple Knight, we want the tool to be a force for good. We want to help organizations to protect the Active Directory. So all of our scripts, they are only reading information from your Active Directory. We don't want attackers going into the scripts and making changes to your Active Directory environment. Going back to the Purple Knight, we can see some high-level information. We can also see the score that I've reached, 45%, and a D score in school grades. But how about we get a more detailed report about what has been found? We can do this by pressing the button on the bottom, View Report, and this will open up the HTML report within your browser. Scrolling down, we have some more high-level information. And then we finally hit the critical indicators of exposure that we have found within your environment. What does critical mean? Critical would mean these are very critical, and it could be a sign that somebody's already gained access to your domain control environment, or it might be showing weaknesses that could be very easily misused by an attacker to gain the access to your environment. After the critical indicators of exposure, you will now see the warnings. I like to see the warnings as being bad hygiene. For example, a domain controller owner is not an administrator. I've seen this in a couple of customer environments. Somehow a customer thought it would be a good idea if a non-administrator user was given the permission or given the role of being an owner of a domain controller. Because of the owner of the domain controller, he also gets some more permissions. That is not a very good suggestion. Otherwise, we can see, for example, LDAP signing is not required on domain controllers. LDAP signing on domain controllers would mean that nobody can sniff into the traffic that is happening. As I said before, these are all cases of bad hygiene. The administrators not staying up to date and keeping the domain controllers in a very fit way. And another one down here is also using very old encryption types such as RC4 or DES. Finally, after the warning indicators of exposure, we hit the informational indicators of exposure. With the informational indicators of exposure, these are typically not things that could be misused by an attacker, but here you can gain lots of information about securing your domain controller environment. So what else do we provide you with? Not just this whole list. Well, let's take a look at one of them. So I obviously don't know about the domain controller skill set of everybody who's attending this webinar, but let's take this one, for example. On a domain controller within your Active Directory users and computers, there is actually a special container called the admin SD holder. This admin SD holder is very special in that every hour a process is started on the domain controllers and it copies the permissions from that admin SD holder onto other servers, other domain controllers within your environment. So you definitely do not want any attacker or any malicious users making changes to the admin SD holder object. Let's have a look at the information we gain from this indicator of exposure. I just click the button, read more. And so once again, we see the mapping to the security frameworks, to the MITRE, to the ANSI framework. We get a description of what has happened, the likelihood of compromise. And then finally, we get to this information. We can see exactly the event timestamp. When did the change to the admin SD holder happen? We can see it's the attribute entity security descriptor that has been changed. And also we can see the distinguished name of the object involved. The remediation steps for this one is pretty simple. You really need to go into the admin SD holder container. You need to look at the permissions and see if there's any abnormal users being given permissions to your admin SD holder. So with our Purple Night tool, it's an absolute free tool, purple-night.com. You can download the tool, unblock the tool, unzip the tool. No installation, no SQL server. Basically, once you've unzipped it, you can execute the tool. It is a very simple tool. Who said security must always cost money? Purple Night is an excellent tool as a basis for you guys to have a look. What about the vulnerabilities within your environment? But it can go further. We have got a Purple Night has got a brother, and this is exactly what Paulina just mentioned. We have our DSP solution, Directory Services Protector. DSP can do. Let me just inform you that the DSP can evaluate the security of your Active Directory environment and also your Entra ID environment. We use two different agents. The first agent is the DSP agent, and the agent is installed on a domain controller. You can also install it on two domain controllers, then you have a failover. What does the DSP agent tool? And this is pretty much where we differentiate from a normal, typical SIEM server that probably many of you have running in your environments. A SIEM server, they typically only evaluate changes being made to the Windows security logs. However, when the attackers gain access to your domain controllers, they're going to be turning off the auditing. In this case, any solution that can only evaluate the Windows event logs, you will be totally blind to any changes being made. Our DSP agent uses the Microsoft API, and we are actually listening into the replication from the domain controllers ourselves. That is how we detect changes. As soon as the change has been made on a domain controller, it starts replicating to the other domain controllers, and then it will get picked up by our DSP agent. Yes, we do use the audit agent. We use the audit agent just to gain information who made a change. We talked enough about the infrastructure of DSP. Let's have a look at one of the first features, although we won't stay too long in the first features because you guys have already seen it. Basically, the Purple Night technology that you have just seen, we have also added this into our DSP. There are a couple of differences, so now I'll just highlight on the differences. What you have seen with Purple Night is that when I want to execute a scan, I need to start the tool, pick my forest, start the scan, and then have a look at the report. It only takes a couple of minutes, but there again, it's still manual work. If your administrator doesn't have the time to execute a scan, well, you're not going to get a new report. However, within DSP, what you can see is that when we click on one of the indicators of exposure, all of these indicators of exposure are running on their own schedule. So this indicator is running every hour. We have lots of indicators of exposure that are only running once an hour. We have some indicators of exposure that are only going to be executed once a day, and some of them will only be executed once a week, just dependent on the severity of the attack. Also, what we have seen in Purple Night, you get a report at the end. Yes, you could also create a Purple Night report within our solution. But then if I want to have a look at the history of these indicators of exposure, what changes have been made, here in DSP is very simple. Just click on the history, and now you can see every time that this indicator of exposure has been running, and also you can get to the results. we can see exactly the same kind of information that the Purple Knight tool has given you. So when we want to get to the data, we can click on the View Data button on the right-hand side, and now we can see exactly the same kind of information that was delivered via the Purple Knight tool. And finally, we can also, the remediation, we also offer remediation. How can you fix this kind of vulnerability within your environment? Otherwise, it's pretty much the same. What you've seen in Purple Knight, we offer it in DSP. One I would like to mention, though, with DSP4, this is our latest and greatest version. We have also moved into machine learning. That means the server is tracking the users and having a look at the normal behavior of these users. Due to our machine learning algorithms, we can now start to identify attack patterns, such as service anomalies, who's trying to access a service, what they don't normally access. We can detect brute force attacks, we can also detect brute password spraying. Pretty much the same as the indicators of compromise. You can click on one of the attack patterns and you can gain some more information about the attack itself, gain access to the history, and also see any actions. But DSP can do a whole lot more than Purple Knight. So what else can DSP do for your organization? We have seen that in many attacks that have happened up till now, it's not as if an attacker logs on at 9 o'clock in the morning and he's finished at 9:30. Many of these attacks, they take weeks, if not months, for them to execute, where the attacker is making small changes to your Active Directory environment until he has enough privileges to execute the full attack. When we have a look at the past attacks, if many of these organizations who have been attacked, if they had a full monitoring solution for the Active Directory, many of these attacks could have been stopped before it is a wider issue. We're talking now about a full monitoring solution for your Active Directory. What we can see here is that I haven't made too many changes in this environment. Well, that's what it looks like. We have a very strong filtering tool. We can go back in time, no problem at all, check for changes from a certain date to a certain date. And we can even define a filter, save up filters, and even just look for certain changes on for a certain user or even for certain attributes. But for the purpose of this demonstration, I don't want to go back in time. Let's go back into my Active Directory and let's make some typical changes that we could see within your domain controller environment. So let's all go to a visit to Germany. And here we can see in my organization unit Germany, I've got some users already set up. So let's start off pretty basic. Let's go into the first user, go into the properties, and maybe just change the description text. There we have it. On the next user, let's try an attack. Let's try and see, well, maybe what happens if we change the email address? I might be a hacker and I would like to try and get users to write me an email instead of the person it was intended for. And pretty much the same thing on the next user. What happens if we go into the properties and to change the telephone number? Maybe someone rings me up and gives me some information that I shouldn't normally have. What about the next users? What about if we add these users into a group? If I was a real attacker at this moment, then I probably wouldn't be adding them to a sales group. I'd be probably adding them into a domain administrator group. And then finally, what happens if users actually get deleted within your environment? So let's have a look at this as well. Delete, there you have it. These users are gone. So here I've made some typical changes that happen in an Active Directory environment on a daily or an hourly basis. Let's go back into the DSP console and see how DSP picks up this information. I'm just going to click the Find Results button, top right, and now we can already start to see the information coming in from our agents that is installed on the domain controller. We still don't have all of the events, so let me click the button again. And here we have it. We have all of the information. So how did it start off? The first user that I changed the description text on this user. The old value it was not set, and the new value, I put in EXATEL webinar. With the next user, I changed the mail attribute. I changed it from the real mail to hacker. On the third user, I changed the telephone number. On the 3 other users, I moved them into the sales group. And then finally, I deleted these users. This is a full monitoring solution for your Active Directory environment. But we can talk a little bit more about not just being a monitoring solution. Let's take another scenario, for example. An administrator is he's in charge of the process of migrating Active Directory environments to each other. And now, as a very last step, the administrator has created a PowerShell script. He wanted to update the location of 50 users, but he's having a very bad day. His PowerShell script has gone terribly wrong. Instead of updating the location of 50 users, his script has actually gone out and updated the location of 750 users. This could be a very timely task to go through the Active Directory and manually correct what his PowerShell script did. However, within DSP, it is so simple to revert back any change that was made within your Active Directory environment. Let me show you how easy it is. You can select the changes that you want to revert back to, click Undo Changes, click Undo. That's it. It's as simple as that. Manually going through, select and revert back any change. Under the AD undo actions, we can see that we can see the tasks that are being undone, but it only takes a couple of seconds. And in fact, probably when we go back into the Active Directory, here you can see we still have the description text. Before I can do a refresh, I need to swap the organization unit. I click the refresh button, and there you have it. The description text is gone. The next user has the real email again. The third user has the real telephone number. With the next 3 users, we added them into the sales group. They have left the sales group again. And finally, the other users have also been recovered. There is just so much that DSP can do. We're not just talking about your typical Active Directory changes. We can also scan for your Entra ID changes. Let me just go back a little bit in time. And here we can see some changes that are made. For example, adding a member to a role. And also we can very simply also undo changes within your Entra ID environment. This is only showing you manual changes. We can also set up automatic rules. For example, here, we can set up automatic rules for Active Directory, scanning your Active Directory for any changes being made to certain objects that you would like to protect. We can also scan for changes within your DNS environment. After all, if an attacker gains access to your DNS environment, they can create some real bad damage. They can start changing IP addresses to your SIEM server, and suddenly your SIEM server is not reachable and it couldn't be used anymore. And finally, a very simple solution for monitoring your GPOs. I really like the GPO modules because changing a GPO does not per se mean that you get a Windows security event. So here within the DSP module, for example, you can't just see the changes, but we could also compare the changes between 2 different GPOs. So let's compare the top 2 GPOs with each other. On the left-hand side, we have the older version, and on the right-hand side, we have the actual version. Obviously, the date timestamp has changed, but that's not really anything to do with the GPO. And what we can see here is that actually somebody has weakened my password policy within my domain. And also under GPOs or DNS, it's not a case of having a full monitoring solution. I could say, well, I don't know who made this change, but this change is not recommended. And we click on the restore button and very easily we could restore the original GPO. This is what I wanted to show with DSP. It's all about having a full security, checking your Active Directory and Entra ID for security vulnerabilities, but then also giving you a full monitoring solution. Who did what, where did they did it, what values did they change, and also giving you the capability of manually or automatically roll back any change that you did not want in your environment. And finally, I am now going to move back to the Active Directory forest recovery solution, which we started off this morning. When I go back into the ADFR, here you have it. It took 13 minutes to revert back my Active Directory forest environment. I will not lie to you, my Active Directory environment is a very small environment. Obviously, the more objects you have within your Active Directory environment, then it will take a little longer. I mentioned earlier, we do have customers with over 500 domain controllers. While using our Semperis Active Directory forest recovery solution, these companies have managed to shorten their recovery time from many, many hours to 3 or 4 hours, even in large and complex environments. So I'm telling you guys, my forest was recovered successfully. Do you guys believe me? Where are we with Zero Trust today? I guess nobody believes me. So let's have a look at one of the domain controllers. This is the domain controller we logged on earlier as the administrator to show you that I had not made any changes. Well, what changes have been made to this server? One, we can see under the server manager, a lot more items coming in down here, but let's have a look. Obviously, the name of this machine has changed. Earlier I had them win-OL something or other. Now this machine is named DC01. Under the software, there's no change. Under the IP address, there's no change, but we're going to see some changes within the Windows administrative tools. Earlier, we didn't see anything about the Active Directory users and computers. We didn't see anything about DHCP or nothing about DNS. Going into the Active Directory users and computers, my original domain controllers, I had 2 domain controllers in the root. Well, you can see they've both now been recovered to new vanilla fresh machines, but I also had another domain. I can change the domain. And also we should see 2 domain controllers once again. Here we can see the recovery of these 4 domain controllers onto alternate software or on alternate hardware onto fresh machines has fully happened. And I would be more than pleased together with our partner EXATEL to come into your environment, do some damage on your domain controllers, and then restore them onto other machines. So I'll hand it back over to Paulina. We've walked through Purple Night, DSP, and we've also checked the status of Active Directory forest recovery.
Thank you, Calum. Calum pokazał nam na samym początku, jak szybko odzyskać Active Directory za pomocą zaledwie kilku kliknięć i w jego infrastrukturze zajęło to 13 minut. Oczywiście w większej infrastrukturze zajmie to odpowiednio więcej czasu, ale i tak jest to czas skrócony z dni, tygodni do godzin lub minut w małej infrastrukturze. Pokazał nam również narzędzie Purple Night. Zachęcam do pobrania. Link znajdziecie Państwo na czacie. Jest to bardzo proste w użyciu narzędzie. Wystarczy pobrać, rozpakować, nie wymaga żadnej instalacji. Po przeskanowaniu Active Directory dostaniemy kompletny raport z krytycznymi punktami oraz ogólny scoring naszej infrastruktury. Calum pokazał również DSP, które nasłuchuje replikacji i w ten sposób wychwytuje wszystkie zmiany. Możemy sprawdzić te zmiany, jakie ktoś naniósł co do godziny, minuty. Pokazał nam również, w jaki sposób one są widoczne i jak szybko po jednym kliknięciem możemy je cofnąć. Cofnięcie zmian automatycznie synchronizuje się z Active Directory. DSP oczywiście ma wiele więcej funkcji, na które już dzisiaj chyba nie mamy czasu, ale zachęcam Państwa do kontaktu. Widzą Państwo teraz na ekranie moje imię, nazwisko, mój adres e-mail. Jeżeli są jakieś pytania, to zachęcam do zadawania ich na czacie.
So we've had one question come in English. So does that our Active Directory force recovery solution, is it only for your on-premise domain controllers? How can we back up your Entra ID and restore this? So the Active Directory force recovery solution I showed you this morning is actually only for your on-premise domain controllers. We do, however, have other software, our disaster recovery for Entra ID, where we can create a backup of your Entra ID and also restore it. It's just different software. We only had 1 hour for this webinar this morning, and so we couldn't go through all of the software that we have from the house Semperis. I hope that this answered your question.
Tak, więc Semperis oferuje również narzędzie do odtwarzania Active Directory w chmurze. Dzisiaj nie mieliśmy czasu, żeby pokazać wszystko, ale tak, można odtworzyć Active Directory również ze środowiska chmurowego.
Dziękuję Paulina, dziękuję Calum. Ja tutaj widzę jeszcze jedno pytanie dotyczące cen i modelu rozliczeń za rozwiązanie Semperis.
Jasne. Semperis, więc tak, licencje są za użytkownika, per użytkownik. Nie za środowisko, nie za wielkość, tylko per użytkownik, plus roczna opłata supportowa. Zapraszam do kontaktu do indywidualnych wycen. Do każdego klienta oczywiście podejdziemy w sposób indywidualny.
Dziękuję Paulina. Tak jak Paulina tu wspomniała, jeśli ktoś z Państwa jest zainteresowany dodatkowymi informacjami, można zgłosić się do Pauliny albo do mnie, zaraz też wyślę mój adres e-mail na czacie. Po webinarze również będziemy wysyłać do Państwa podsumowanie, informacje i zachęcamy do zgłaszania się do nas już bezpośrednio z pytaniami. Możemy też bardzo chętnie umówić się na spotkanie online czy stacjonarne, pokazać więcej, opowiedzieć więcej o tym, co już dzisiaj w ciągu tej godzinki nie zdążyliśmy. Także zachęcamy do kontaktu. A może są jeszcze jakieś pytania na bieżąco, to zapraszam na czat albo do części tej pytania, odpowiedzi. Wysyłam na czacie kontakt też do mnie.
Chyba nie ma pytań. W razie gdyby się jakieś pojawiły, to zapraszamy. Ja ze swojej strony dziękuję Państwu bardzo za uwagę i poświęcony czas. Calum, thank you once again.
From the House of Semperis, many thanks to our great partner EXATEL. We look forward to working with you in the future, and also many thanks for the attendees. We hope that you could gain a lot of information about how you can improve the security of your Active Directory environment. And from me personally, thank you everybody who was on this call today. It's a pleasure for me. Whatever you do, have a great rest of the day and stay safe.
Thank you very much, Calum. Thank you, Paulina. Dziękujemy wszystkim Państwu. Będziemy już na dzisiaj kończyć. Zapraszamy do kontaktu bezpośredniego. Do zobaczenia.